good evening. Welcome to this November 19th policy workshop of the West Orange Board of Education. Mr. Calavano.
Roll call. Mr. Alper.
Here.
Mrs. Parklinger.
Here.
Mr. Rothstein.
Here.
Mrs. Trigg-Scales.
Here.
And Mrs. Tunnicliffe.
Here.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands
One nation, under
under
God,
God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Notice of meeting. Please take notice that adequate notice of this meeting has been provided in the following manner. That a written notice was sent from the Office of the Secretary of the Board at 4 p.m. on November 12, 2020. That said notice was sent by regular mail to the West Orange Township Clerk and the editors of the West Orange Chronicle and the Star Ledger. That said notice was posted in the lobby administration building of the Board of Education.
All right, so we're going to go out of order and get the board business done first. So if I could have a motion for personnel, items 1 and 2.
So moved. Second.
Excellent. Any discussion? Seeing none. Mr. Calavano.
Mrs. Merklinger.
Yes.
Mr. Rothstein.
Yes.
Mrs. Tunnicliffe.
Yes.
Vice President Trigg-Scales.
Yes.
President Alper.
Yes. And next reports, item 1, the HIB self-assessment scores. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Dr. Cascone, do you want to maybe spend a minute or two and as we're vamping and sort of explain a little bit about, what the scores are on a scale of and,
Yeah, thank
what
you.
we're looking at?
Surely. So this is this process of the school self-assessment is pursuant to the Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights Act and is also reflected in the Board of Education policy. And basically, it's a process in which each school safety team engages on an annual basis. The school safety team is comprised of the building principal or an administrative designee, a school counselor, anti-bullying specialist, and teachers. And basically, it assesses the school as pertains to the school's compliance and implementation of requirements, procedures, protocol, which really are pulled directly out of statute. And you can see actually, if you I believe I sent home the copies of the self-assessments. You can see that the self-assessment references the 18A statute from which these elements come. At this stage of the game, with as many years as it's been since the Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights was implemented, our district and most districts have pretty well-established procedures and protocols. And so the evaluation is really an opportunity to look at school climate data and look at any HIB data, incident reports that have come from the school that year, and understand really if there needs to be a different focus placed on some of the trainings and some of whether those be for staff or for students. For example, in a particular year, you might have had a predominance of HIB cases that were happening in the virtual environment, the digital environment. And so you might put a more robust kind of digital citizenship or cyberbullying component both on the staff training side and the student side. But what we really see through these assessments is the numbers don't change drastically from year to year, but rather just the focuses of what we do in the schools change based upon the data that's come in that year. But just having been an anti-bullying coordinator myself, my previous district, and looking at our protocols and procedures, we're very well aligned with what is reflected in our policies and in the state statute and code.
All right, sounds good.
I have a question. What time of year does the PD usually take place, Dr. C, for the school safety team?
I think when I referred to the PD, I was referring more to PD for all staff. But typically, school safety team would receive the training at the onset of the year. in advance of the start to the year.
Because I just noticed that on some of the schools, there was a bit of a similarity, and it had to do with the training for the school safety committee. So I thought maybe due to the shutdown, that may have had some effect on it.
I see what you're saying, right in terms of, yeah, I mean, it's a fair point, Ms. Trigg-Scales. I mean, we were pushing in so much PD at the beginning of the year, and not having been in, been in brick and mortar, that I'll have to double back on that and see the extent to which we actually move forward with those trainings. Now, of course, our school safety teams are generally a pretty set, right? We don't see a lot of flux from year to year and who's on our school safety teams. So it's not as if the folks who are serving in those teams haven't been trained previously, but if there were any additional or new components that we may have wanted them to know, we should definitely check and see if that was actually done. So good pickup.
Right, and since it was a self-assessment, they noted that, so.
All right.
Are we seeing any more cyberbullying or anything like that with the shutdown from the pandemic?
You know what? I'm not seeing really a lot of HIB coming up. I mean, we've had since we've opened, we've had very few incidences that have risen to the board level and investigative level. Generally speaking, students are generally being pretty respectful of one another. I think we're seeing, more of students maybe expressing, just kind of anxiety maybe towards themselves or their circumstances rather than directing it at other people.
Right. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Anything further? All right, let's vote.
Erlinger,
Yes.
Mr. Rothstein,
Yes.
Mrs. Tunnicliff,
Yes.
Vice President Trigg-Scales,
Yes.
President Alper.
Yes. All right, let's go ahead and open up for public comment. The way this works, there's one public comment section in this meeting. When we go to public comment, you'll be able to click the button to raise your hand if you'd like to speak. Once you do, you'll have 3 minutes. Be sure to give us your name and your address when you come in. And again, please try to respect the 3-minute limit. We don't like to have to cut people off, but we need to if you go too far over. And with that, you can take it away.
Okay, let's see. I do not see any hands raised at this time. Would anyone like to make public comment? If so, you can use your raise hand feature and I will call on you.
Sorry, just a question. Is that a feature that needs to be enabled? Because sometimes I'm able to see it oh, I'm sorry, I do see it now. Sorry.
Okay. I'll ask one more time, and if I don't see a hand raised, then I will just give notice to the panelists that they can continue. Does anyone want to make a public comment? Oh, we have one.
Okay.
Okay, so the name is Naya McKinney. Naya, if you could state your name and address for the record, please. Naya, if you could state your name for the record and your address.
No, she's on mute.
Wait, do I say it here or in the chat?
We can hear you now. Go ahead. Yes. Say it out loud.
Okay, my name is Naya McKinney and my address is nmckinney25 at westorangeschools.org.
Ms. Tomasi,
Yes.
typically, Ms. Graptisa will close the video.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me do that then. 1 second. All right, Naya, you can go ahead and speak, but you will have to unmute yourself.
Hello.
There you go.
Okay, hi. So, to start, I wanted to bring up the situation with the middle school's new winter schedule. I'm pretty sure most of you got the email and such, but I was wondering. So my first question was about what happened with the high school, about like their schedule change and such.
Naya, we don't answer in real time. We take all the public comment from everyone who's here, and then there may be responses at the end. So you can just go ahead and read through, and we'll take some notes.
Oh, okay. Let me grab them out then. Yeah, so at the end then we'd like to go.
Naya,
I'm
say
sorry.
that one more time.
Okay, hi. Some of the students were wondering what happened with the high school and like what the board's response to them was after they made the petition. Something else we wanted to talk about was about the schedule for the middle schools and explain more details about what happened and why we didn't get a warning about the new schedule change prior to school starting. Yeah, and I'm pretty sure there was a email sent out, so it has the rest of the information there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Naya. Are there any other questions? One more question. This is Hannah Amoya. Hannah, could you state your address for the record, please?
HAMYL at westorangeschools.org. Yeah.
Thank you. What's your question?
Okay. So my question was about how it was also about the schedule change. In the email Mr. Klimt sent me, he was talking about how like the grades for the change in the winter schedule was also about grades, more specifically the related arts grades. So it said that like 16% of the students in 8th grade had either D's or F's in related arts classes. And I said, and I'm trying to say that if we were to keep the current schedule, you should implement that you should have A days one week and then B days the next week. So like I have band period 2. So if it's an A week, then I just have band period 2 one time, and then I have band period 2 the second time we meet for class. And then I also wanted to talk about the negative effects that will come with the schedule change, or with like the eye strain, that will go on like the students' eyes when they're looking at screens for too long. And yeah, people say that you should get the blue light glasses for your eyes to help them see better. And that's technically a myth, because the real reason why your eyes hurt after looking at the screen is because you're not blinking enough. Because when you blink, you create a strand of tears on your eyes, cleaning them so you can see better. So if you look at the screen too long, we're not really thinking because we're focused on the class. That's why I think the eyes. And also it's about sitting down. I know that when we sit down, like the lower body is pretty much like your legs. You're just sitting like straight, organized in one format, and they don't move. It pretty much weakens your legs, and they can be more prone to injuries that way. Also, another problem is that during school, we tend to slouch in our chairs, sometimes just out of habit, and that's bad because it can lead to like chronic back pain and also long-term effects in your back. That's all I really have to say.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay. At this time, there's no one else with their hand raised. Would anyone else like to make public comment? Okay, I think that that is it.
All right, we'll close that section of the meeting out. Dr. Cascone, anything?
Thank you, Mr. Hopper. Yeah, I'll just a few remarks. First off, I just want to thank the two students for coming out tonight. I appreciate that, and I am very proud of you for coming to this board meeting and speaking up and advocating. And I'm happy to provide what clarity I can to help you understand the decision making behind it. First off, I think that it's important to recognize that as we made this this postponement and shift into winter virtual, and while this may not necessarily been directly communicated with the students, it was communicated to the parent community that there were going to be changes forthcoming with regard to the moving from the fall hybrid schedule into the winter virtual, and more specifically in one of my initial letters, I talked about the idea of increased instructional time and possibly instruction on Fridays. It was our intention to have officially communicated that to the community at the board meeting on Monday. However, as is common, that information trickled out through the grapevine, if you will, and got into the hands of parents and students in advance of us having an opportunity to present it at the board meeting. But that is really, as far as I'm concerned, is sort of moot as it relates to the ultimate decision that was made about the high school. Because when I examined the decision about the high school and went back and thought about it and looked at it from strictly a pedagogical sense, a teaching and learning sense, I wasn't fully convinced that we hadn't simply created a solution without a clear understanding of what the problem was, right? I mean, I think we kind of sort of inherently knew, like we knew certain students needed more time, but not necessarily how, and not necessarily all of them. And I do think that is sort of a distinct concept for the high school, because there's really no setting, whether it be elementary, middle, or high school, where you have such kind of different types of groups of students that you're servicing, right? You have students that are on a 4-year college track. You have students that are on a 2-year college track. You have students on the military track, students on the technical school track, students that are going into the workforce. And so we have very different post-secondary paths that we're addressing. And so when I was reflective about that, I said, I really think I'm not questioning the fact that we might need more time at the high school, but I'm just not sure that painting with this broad brush is the way to do it. And so that's why we've kind of taken a step back. Now, the day after that board meeting, first thing that morning, I called a meeting of the middle school principals. And I really wanted to get their perspective on really how they felt about their professional opinion about the schedule changes that they really had developed. I mean, I didn't develop them. The board certainly didn't develop them. Those schedules were developed by the building principals in collaboration with the teachers. And I asked them very directly. I said, obviously you understand the reversal that I made at the high school. Tell me how you feel about these schedules. And without exception, all the middle school principals, the instructional leaders of those buildings, gentlemen who I know to be leaders who consistently look to put students' best interests, said that they really felt that these changed schedules were going to make their schedules better. Now, and there were reasons for that, and some of them were alluded to, but namely the fact that for middle grade learners, having those layoffs in between classes, which, for example, if you have class on a Thursday, you might not see your teacher again until a Tuesday. And because of that, what they found is that teachers were erring on the side of assigning more work because they weren't seeing them. And we weren't getting that continuity and consistency for those middle grade learners. And there were others where the way the schedule was is that you were seeing your Spanish teacher twice a month. I mean, there were real grave deficiencies from a pedagogical standpoint, a teaching standpoint in that schedule that they felt was going to correct. Now that doesn't rule out or render completely invalid some of the points that were raised about, screen time and things of this nature. But what I would suggest is, and I have 3 adolescent daughters, 2 in high school and one in middle school, and I see the amount of time that they're spending not only in virtual learning, but then on their own smartphone devices. And I'll say to them, put down the smartphone, put it down. You've been on a screen enough. So I think that that's something to consider as well, is monitoring your own screen time for your own personal reasons, so that you're not overloading on it. But in the end, it was because of the confidence of the school principals that I felt comfortable moving forward with, and supporting that decision. Now, it doesn't mean that 100% of the people are going to be, thrilled about it, but that's never going to be the case. But what I do feel confident in is that the schedule represents the best educational interests of the students. But that being said, ladies, if one thing we've shown is that nothing is set in stone forever, because these times are so dynamic, because they're so different. We recognize that we need to constantly be listening, we need to constantly be adjusting, and so we're gonna do that with this schedule. And I've spoken to the middle school principals about after 2 or 3 weeks of implementation of the schedule, to put out some sort of a parent and student survey to gather some feedback on, okay, so how is this going? What are the challenges? How can we perhaps adjust to make it even more effective than it is? So that was the rationale behind that, about moving forward with that as different from the high school. I think that's all I have, Mr. Alper.
All right. Thank you, Dr. C. Naya, Hannah, I want to thank both of you for your email and for your comments here tonight. It's always important for us to hear from our students, and I'm very glad that you both decided to reach out and let us know what you guys were thinking. It's important. I think, as I mentioned too, just as another aspect of this, one of the things that we want to remember is, if you go back to the summer and think when we were still thinking that school was going to start in a hybrid model in September, one of the things we were planning was that Wednesdays at the time was going to be the asynchronous day. So you'd have kids in school buildings on Monday and Tuesday, and again on Thursday and Friday, but not on Wednesday. So there's that day in between for the deep clean. And then for the days that the kids were in school, we were looking for the hybrid schedule at doing these half-day schedules so that they would be in the buildings together, sharing the same atmosphere for fewer hours. So when September came and we had to stay virtual for a while, but we thought we were coming back in November, we kept that schedule. But when November 9th came and went, I think a lot of people started to say, well, wait a sec, why are we keeping, and that Wednesday at some point shifted to Friday. So I think people started to say at some point around November, well, wait a second, if we're not able to go back to school, if we're looking at staying virtual even longer, maybe the school day we have should resemble the traditional school day a bit more and be 5 days a week and maybe be a little bit longer, especially because that day off that was created specifically for some deep cleaning is no longer necessary because nobody's in the buildings. So I think that was the, some of the rationale and some of the thought process that a lot of people were having as we started having these discussions, that led to this. All right. So with that, we'll move on to the board policy workshop. And does the policy folks want to start this off, or Dr. C, do you want to set the stage for what we're looking at first? Whatever you guys think makes sense.
I don't mind, sort of emceeing, if you will, and then
Sure.
And then kind of just kind of getting us kind of rolling. And so right, so just kind of working our way left to right in the columns, right? We have our mandated policies, right? And so we have a handful of mandated policies which have yet to be adopted, and they fall into 2 groups. One is the group that you have in your folder, and those are the I'm just going to drop into the folder. Those are the recommended edits. So those were basically the strike-through versions that we sent to Strauss Esme, which they used to then develop the proofs. And so you have both those sets of documents in the folder. You have the suggested edits, and then you have the proofs that came back from Strauss Esme. Now, if you recall, my intention was originally to have those be approved at a board meeting. Now we're going back at least 4 to 6 weeks, at least. I think the board said, you know what, we haven't had an opportunity to cross-reference the suggested edits with the proof, so we want to do that before we ultimately approve them. So that's kind of the juncture we are at here. The intention of the administration superintendent would be to move those proofs forward for adoption at the December 7th meeting. So I don't know if it necessarily merits, unless you had looked at some and had compared them and additional feedback came up in your comparison between the suggested edits and the proofs. But if not, then, we would just move those forward on the 7th for approval. So in your review of the suggested edits as compared to the proofs, did you turn up anything additional?
So just for my own, I guess, in reviewing both of them, I didn't see the red line version, so I don't see what they changed. And I don't know if it's just the version I was looking at and how it came up on my computer, but I didn't see where the actual changes were made, so I'm not sure what I'm comparing.
Cheryl, I didn't
Yes.
find it at first. It's in that little line that says folder.
I'm in the, yeah,
At the top, you see the little, it just says folder, because the other ones you can actually see the page.
right. Okay,
If you open that, that's where they are. I just found them a little while ago.
Yes,
Okay.
there's a folder on the top there that has the original strike-through versions.
gotcha. Okay,
And then, then there's the proofs, which is the final
Okay.
document.
my apologies.
No, not a problem at
No.
all.
It's-
So, I mean, I think, we have on a lot on the docket. So, if you wanted to, kind of put that on like the to-do list of saying, you know what, I now know what I'm looking at. So I'll do the comparisons, make sure everything's on the up and up. And if there were any policies that jumped out at you in your comparisons, we could potentially table that for the 7th, or we could move them forward. So that's the first set. Did anybody have any other thoughts?
Yeah, I had, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay. I know that the board does not approve regulations, but when we're looking at policy and regulation 5600, I just want to make sure that the principals had a chance to review those. Dr. C.
Yes. These were all run through the building principals and assistant principals.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I had a couple of questions. Let's see. One of them is on policy 3218. Dr. Cascone, you had called out that there was an option noted on that policy that we could either choose to adopt as part of the policy or not.
Yes, that actually, one sec.
This is use, possession, or distribution of substances, policy 32.
Yes, that's actually on my, that's actually a separate agenda item. Because Mr. Rothstein, there are 2 policies that fall into that option category.
Okay,
I was just going to kind of treat those as a separate item.
sounds good. It was the first one that I
Yeah.
had noted in the list of proofs, which is
Yes.
why I called it up, but I'll skip it and wait for that second.
Okay, very good.
Okay, so sticking with the other ones, then the next one I had questions about policy 3283, electronic communications between teaching staff and teaching staff members and students.
Is that where is the where is that located, Gary? That's not one of the ones that had a mandated edit, was it?
I believe that it did, and I'm looking at it in the proofs.
Oh yeah, I see it. Okay. Why did Liz not give me that one?
Which are the proofs?
Okay, that's all right. Go ahead, Gary.
Do board members have that policy or want me to wait a moment?
I'm looking
What's
at
the
it,
number?
3283.
30.
So are we looking at it in the folder that says mandated edits or the folder that says, they both say mandated edits? Because there's
Yeah.
folders inside of folders. Are they the same
I'm
folder?
looking
Is
at-
that the deal?
There was
I've got a
another
3283
folder.
open.
Yeah, there was another folder that had a document called 1B proofs. And 1B proofs has the policies that have incorporated the edits to the mandatory policies from the previous round.
That's correct.
So that's what I'm looking at the
Oh, you're
moment.
looking at the version that's inside the file called 1B proofs.
You know, I think we all downloaded things a little bit differently. For me, it's a PDF called 1B proofs that shows up in a folder called Drive Download,
Yeah.
followed by a long series of characters.
Yeah, I don't have that.
All right,
It's the first folder.
I'm looking at the policy though, Gary.
Okay. Maybe I'll talk through what my questions are. So this policy focuses, I think, very appropriately on making sure that contact between teaching staff and students over electronic communications is appropriate and is regulated. I'm looking at, it's on the PDF, it's page 4 of 5, number 4B.
Mhm.
And what I'm wondering here is, it speaks specifically about a teaching staff member shall not accept friend requests from any student on their personal social media networking website, et cetera. But there's no mention about sending a request. I would hope that wouldn't be necessary, but I'm wondering if it would be a good idea to include that here. Something along the lines of a teaching staff member shall not send a friend request to or accept friend requests from any student on their personal social media.
The only thing I would, and it may be covered in A of that, potentially, which is teaching staff members prohibited from communicating with any student through the teaching staff member's personal social networking website or other internet-based website,
I think you're right.
right?
I think you're right. Valid. So I'm going to strike that question or comment. In item C below, if a teaching staff member has a student as a friend on their personal social networking website, et cetera, they must permanently remove the student. So that got me wondering how we're defining student. And unless I missed it, I didn't see a definition that I thought was really adequate here. You know, so for example, are we talking about any child who exists in the school district? Or is it a child who's specifically enrolled in the teaching staff member's class, or a student who was previously enrolled in the teaching staff member's class? I'd sort of like to close any loopholes there.
Yeah, I think it's, Gary, and this is my thought on it. I think it's broad and all inclusive for that reason, which is that it is literally any student that is a current student within the school district would apply. So because a teacher could could have former students, they could have a student that was in a club, a student that was in a sport, right? So I think it's general for that reason, and that it means any student that's a student within the school district.
Okay, and do you think that's the way that would be? Can we safely assume that's the way it would always be interpreted? That it would be interpreted that broadly? Because I think that's the appropriate way for it to be looked at, but I just wasn't sure whether we need to tighten that language up a little bit.
And tighten it up for the purpose of staff, if you will, so that it's clear to staff that that we mean any student.
Yeah, so that it's clear that for example, a teacher wouldn't say, "Oh, this student wasn't in my class, and so it wasn't clear to me that that wasn't an acceptable connection."
Oh, I would just kind of would then offer that question up to the board for consideration.
Seems reasonable.
Yeah, I think it's a valid point. And I would also go so far as to say, does that include coaching staff? Do we have coaches who are not teachers?
There's
in our-
actually,
that maybe
there's one
coaching?
last point here, yeah, that I wanted to get into that I think gets a little bit more complex than that last one did. Why don't I, if you don't mind, let me just jump into the last point. So what I was imagining here as well, so the policy here, again, I think does a great job of being very explicit and very clear that communication between a student, a teacher to a student is not acceptable, except in the very narrow guidelines of what the school functions are, school assignments and school functions. But that got me wondering about a scenario that falls outside of that. So for example, if somebody who happens to be a teacher in our school district also happens to be a coach of a non-school team in the community, or a religious leader at a church, or a summer camp counselor, and it's the policy of any of those organizations for the leaders in those organizations to communicate with student participants in those programs via social media or text messaging if they're out on a field trip or something like that, then this sort of puts that teacher into a position where they don't have much of an out in the way that I'm reading the policy. And I was wondering if there should be some room here in a situation like that for a teacher to be able to notify the principal, the superintendent, the parents or guardians of the student, and make sure they're aware of what the school policy is and that there is an exception made in these circumstances, but that it's important that it not happen without it being acknowledged.
I would think in those kind of cases that it would be, I would tie it back to who the paycheck is coming from and what their guideline, if West Orange Public Schools is not paying them and they're working for somebody else at a summer camp for the summer, that they would no longer be under our jurisdiction. But I don't know, that's an interesting question. But I would think that dependent upon the paycheck and that, once they're back in West Orange, what do the rest of you think? I don't know.
And I would agree that I think that's how it probably should be interpreted. I just, after reading through this policy pretty carefully, I felt like the language was very explicit about there being no circumstances where that communication is acceptable.
Yeah, I think I would agree. I think it's kind of a difficult spot because you do have a lot of volunteer coaches within the community, and just I think by habit, it's, oh yeah, here's my phone number in case of an emergency, right? And I think, just having been involved myself, that, sometimes you do run into those situations where unintentionally, you're getting a text message from one of your players or participants, or if it's a religious ed class or something along those lines, where those are strictly volunteers. So it's hard to define where the paycheck is coming from. So I think this is definitely one way to kind of take off and look into a little bit more.
I mean, texting is sort of allowed 1 up in 3A1, sort of, but it doesn't really address, the issue where it's the outside connection is why. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, the only thing I would just refer, kind of have the board consider is that, these policies are written by attorneys. They're the owners of Strauss Esme are attorneys. And it just becomes a question of, and listen, I'm here, I'm following your lead on this. It's just how granular we want to get on policies. When we know we have a lot of policies that are unique to West Orange that are going to require deep dives, do we basically look at this policy and say, this is a policy that was written by attorneys. It's used as it reads in hundreds of districts around the state. Are we overthinking this? And maybe the answer is no. But if we get this granular on every policy, and it's just because it's a board goal, it's gonna take us a very, very long time to get through this manual. That's all. I just want to present that as a thought. And I'm not a rush through it guy. I'm not saying we need to approve it boilerplate. I just think just a lens we should keep as we kind of try and work through this
Right.
this endeavor. But I'm happy to pull it off if that's if the
Are some of the suggestions that Mr. Rothstein made, would those be more appropriate to put into the regulations?
Yeah. So, I mean, when I look at this, you know, so it's kind of like, so there, I think there's also, the implication I definitely see here is the training implication on ensuring that we've been clear and explicit in presenting and training our staff members on the policy, you know, because I mean, the reality of it is that if let's say, for example, you know, a teacher was engaging, you know, because this policy is really, it's not to protect against the occasional text that happens that we don't know about that is completely harmless, although we obviously wouldn't encourage that, and it is against the policy. This policy is really to protect the board in the event that there was something that was sent that was not appropriate. You know, we can come back to this and we can say, well, I thought it meant, you know, it didn't mean every student. Well, it says student, and this person is a student in the district, so that's the policy, right? So that generality helps, I think, the board, because if you start to make it more granular, then it becomes more subject to interpretation, where a student is a student, right? So I think there's a training component for sure, and there are definitely regulations associated with this. But we can, we can certainly, we can pull it and think about it a bit more. We can have board counsel look at it.
I think you make a good point, Dr. Cascone, that a more general interpretation maybe serves best, and maybe I am overthinking this. My mind just wandered to the point that I didn't want to put a teacher who's doing the right thing by volunteering in the community into a position where they're concerned that they're out of compliance and able to communicate with all students except for one who happens to be in the same school district. And but if that's not a likely scenario, and it's something where we're better served by handling that situation if it comes up and not codifying anything in policy here, then I'm okay with that.
Right.
Okay.
And I would agree with Dr. Cascone that it is written in general enough terms that it would give the board latitude and give the superintendent latitude if there is a violation. And again, if we go through every policy and find exceptions, it is going to be an unending process for us.
For the record, that was the only one I had a comment on.
Promise?
Absolutely.
Just to kind of fill the dead air here a little bit, there are some other mandated policies that you don't have here that are in the final stages of review. I will have those back, and those would actually come. Those next time they come forward, they'll come forward as second reading. So that those will probably not come forth for the board for approval until probably January. But these are a few more mandated. Any other thoughts on any of these in terms of the edits versus the proofs?
No, I thought the edits that I saw all looked like good edits, and reading through, I think that reading through the proofs document, I thought the wording looked good on all of those.
Okay. Okay. A second here. So the next thing I had on the docket here for you were two policies that required choices or options, and this was I can kind of just talk you through this. It was so it's the harassment, intimidation, and bullying policy 5512. The option in it, and I can really just explain this to you. The option in it is they changed the statute. It used to be, for example, Cheryl, if a parent said, my kid was bullied, said the word bullying, it had to be an investigation.
Mhm.
They then gave the building principal some discretion to evaluate the claim and make the determination as to whether an investigation was necessary.
Mhm.
And so, that's the option in this policy is, which is based, prior to the initiating the investigation, the principal or designee in consultation with the anti-bullying specialist may make a preliminary determination as to whether the reported incident or complaint, assuming all the facts presented are true, is a report. So here's I think the challenge with this one. In order for a building principal to be able to confidently make the determination that it doesn't require an investigation, don't they sort of need to conduct an investigation? Right? You know what I'm saying?
Maybe. I mean, it depends on the situation. It depends on the complainant. It depends on whether this has been already in the exact same situation, been denied, because, given
Right.
that it's appealable, I'm good with it.
You're good with the option?
Because it's appealable. If there was no appeal, I think I would feel differently.
Okay.
And as long as you use the ABS, there are two people looking at it. It doesn't fall all on the onus of the principal. So if the principal, along with the ABS, make that determination.
I'm good. Well, we will leave it in.
Totally agreed. The one question I had about that optional section was the last paragraph, the beginning of the last paragraph of the optional. A board hearing shall be held within 10 business days of receipt of the request. And I was just curious procedurally what that looks like.
I mean, it would just need to be a quorum. And so it wouldn't necessarily need to be a board meeting per se. We would just need to have actually, would it be a quorum, Ken?
Oh, we haven't had one this whole year. Yeah, you have to have a quorum.
Yeah, so it would be typically they're done on the same nights as board meetings, just because y'all already have it on your schedule and people already know that you're meeting. So it's just easier. It gets kind of complicated when you do it outside of a regular meeting date. So, and it would be at the, if in fact you did not have another public meeting within 10 days of the report, then you would have to actually schedule a special public meeting, right, John, for the purpose of the HIB hearing?
It's closed.
Closed, yeah.
It's closed. I mean, we haven't
But
done
it
many
would have to
lately,
be
but
announced.
when we were doing a lot of them, it was they'd always be closed. They'd usually be at central office. And they were usually special meetings. We didn't usually, I think, because our closed sessions are usually pretty packed, and sometimes these could take a while. But you can sort of decide how to do them as they come up.
But even though it's a closed, it does need to be announced.
Right. It still has to be
publicly.
announced. You still have to open the door and announce the meeting, and then you go into closed and bring in the parties, and
And that would allow enough time to make those announcements and hold the meeting. Okay, great. That was it.
Yep, it's easier because you only have to find 3 people to get it done. So.
All right, the next policy that has kind of an option in it is this use of possession or distribution of substances, and the option is basically that a teaching staff member has been determined by the board physician to be under the influence of a substance during work hours or at a school-sponsored function where the teaching staff member has been assigned job responsibilities may be offered a last chance agreement upon the recommendation of the superintendent and approval by the board.
Ooh, I'm sorry, I'm on mute. Don't we have a zero tolerance policy?
Right.
So this would essentially allow them, I'm assuming last chance means they have one more chance, like a third strike.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of right. It's zero tolerance. So this would be, let's say there was that superintendent and ultimately the board concurred that there was an extenuating circumstance. Who knows? Maybe they had had some sort of a tragic event in their family or something of that nature. It gives us an opportunity to not just throw where we would be obliged by the policy otherwise. Go ahead.
No, I'm personally zero tolerance. So I don't, if you're, I guess my feeling is, everyone else can obviously chime in, but if you're a teacher and you know this, you shouldn't be doing drugs or anything that you're supposed to be setting a standard for our students and being a role model. So I am definitely a zero tolerance for drugs or anything not legal. So my feeling would be that we would not adopt a last chance agreement, but that's how I feel about it.
Looking at the rest of this, I'm curious what exactly the last chance agreement modifies, because the rest of it, it looks like it's saying in every case that if a teacher is found to have been under an influence, that they'll be subject to, I think it says appropriate discipline. I lost my place, but it was something like appropriate discipline, which could include withholding an increment, et cetera, et cetera. So it seems like the policy itself isn't saying zero tolerance. I'm wondering if this is I can't tell if this is a way to make it more strict so that you can say, all right, in the future, the appropriate discipline has already been decided. This was your last chance. I'm not sure if this is an easier option or a harder. I'm a little confused.
And I don't think it's just illegal substances. I think that you could have an interaction between prescribed drugs and be under the influence. And I would hate to ruin a person's career. I think we are just leaving it open so that there's an option. Superintendent has an option. So I would like to weigh in with the chance.
Oh, and alcohol is also an illegal substance, and that could come on, under
Right. I mean, I just don't think a teacher in this setting with students should be under the influence of drugs or alcohol. So
well, no, they shouldn't.
So, to me, it's, that going into a situation, that going into work. I don't know why you would need a second chance for that.
Well, I mean, it looks like the policy itself, that there's both a flexibility and a progressive nature, potentially progressive nature, because in the last paragraph on the second page, as Ken noted, says shall be subject to appropriate discipline, which may include but not be limited to termination of a non-tenured staff, filing tenure charges. May include.
That's distribution. That's distribution at the top of that page. Yeah. You're looking. So at the top of page 2, the bottom of the first paragraph, or the middle of the first paragraph on page 2.
Okay, withholding
appropriate discipline.
Terminating and or filing tenure charges. Okay, so it does give a. It doesn't say simply, that the employee will be terminated and tenure charged. Like that would be zero tolerance if it. And I'm not sure under the law whether that would even be. We live in a very liberal state.
We're also a drugs-free school zone.
That's true. But I think there's a, and I'm not a, I feel the same way as you do. But I also know that we've come to look at addiction, in just like we're looking at mental health in different ways. I think we're looking at addiction in different ways as well. And so certainly if, that behavior actually ended up leading to, God forbid, harm of students, or there were multiple occasions. But I wonder, if we're talking about addiction, we're talking about a first-time offense, and it's not something where, they made a scene in front of students or they harmed students. it really comes down to kind of, I would kind of an organizational philosophy of, and the person themselves of, do we want to come at this from you're an employee, we want to give an opportunity to try and help you rehabilitate yourself. And if you demonstrate in good faith that you will do that, then you have a home here. If you're not willing to give up your, to work through your addiction, and you come back to work again, then you're terminated, right?
So just I guess, from another perspective, so based on everything that's in the prior 2 pages, to Ken's point, it kind of does give that leeway of saying,
Yeah.
superintendent's discretion and board discretion. What is the harm in taking the option, taking it out? Because if everything's protected above, so to your point, if someone were dealing with a mental illness or struggling with an addiction, something along those lines, wouldn't that fall under the previous paragraphs where it's saying that you have the discretion?
Yeah, this is one, you're right. This is one where I actually hate to say it, I'd actually be interested in asking Matt Jacoby this question.
Mhm.
I think this is a legal question. Like, what is?
Yeah,
Right?
especially because,
Strikes me-
the way last chance agreement is capitalized here, that signifies that it means something, but it's not defined in the policy either.
Exactly. I was going to say the main thing that seems a difference to me here is that the last chance agreement would be or could be a written document that requires board approval, because it says a written last chance agreement must be approved by the board. And so this would be a way of, unlike anything that's mentioned earlier in the policy, bringing the board into a formal step in how the situation is addressed with the
Right.
employee.
And it sounds like it's almost a pre-notice of zero tolerance, right? It's the next time you're signing this, and it
I
says that
agree.
the next time this happens, we're not going to be able to talk about whether you're going to lose an increment or whatnot. You're going to be, it's
That's how
gonna
I'm reading it, yeah.
I mean,
But yeah, it's worth, I think, running past Matt.
yeah, I'm going to
Right.
ask him that.
And again, I just want to say that if we go with the zero tolerance and we're talking about tenure charges, we're talking about ruining someone's career for one incident. And it could be the one incident, as I said, that it's not even an illegal drug, but it could be alcohol, under the influence of alcohol, or a bad combination of prescription drugs. So I would hope that we would be open to at least the last chance.
I'm going to follow up on that because, like, I think we've ascertained the policy allows for some degree of latitude for the superintendent and the board. I'm just curious to know, from a legal perspective, and it's kind of to what Ken was saying, is like, is that good for the board? Like, is that ultimately a protective measure for the board? Like, does that make it more stringent?
It feels to me like it does, is the way I'm reading it, that the last chance option gives you, that there's, I think you would always have the option to move for tenure charges, or if they're non-tenured, for termination on a first offense, if it was significant enough. This appears to be a way to, I don't know, give you the option. I don't know. If you've got a case where it's happened multiple times and you want to make sure, I don't know.
Well, let me check with Matt. I think I can do that quickly enough where I should be able to get an answer and report back as to whether that's what his recommendation is, and share that with you. Okay, moving along. Ms. Tunnicliffe had just kind of raised the idea of, since we have a policy here pertaining to the employment of the school business administrator and board secretary, and we're undergoing a transition, that it might just be prudent to just look at this policy and see if there was anything that jumped out about it that we wanted to maybe revise as a result. So.
What number was that one? I'm sorry.
1310. That actually came through an email, Cheryl, yeah.
Yeah, it's a question
In the
about the
folder, too.
second paragraph where where several qualifications are specified. Experience in the fields of economics, law, accounting, organizational theory, management or administration, finance, and other responsibilities, et cetera. Is this a checklist that was in existence and that was used in the current search, or is this something that would apply moving forward? Because, I was thinking,
Or is it statutory?
organizational theory, I'm not
It's a little odd,
organized
right?
enough to know what that is.
Yes,
So-
that's actually an excellent point.
And so this one is one of the ones that's specific and unique to West Orange.
Okay.
It's in that column.
Do you,
So,
do
I
we,
could not find that on our site, and I don't know if somebody can.
Yeah, I'll find it.
To where that is, because I was
I will
looking
find
for it and it didn't.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to, to put this in front of the board, considering where we're at right now currently. But, I did find it a little bit amusing, and then maybe a little bit concerning how specific that one paragraph is.
I agree with that, Gary.
It's goofy enough that I'll bet you it comes from the statute. It is a weird list of qualifications.
I read that as more like, these would be nice to haves, because it kind of said, or it wasn't,
Right.
that here are some of the qualifications you might want to consider in having a school business administrator, but
I mean, it would seem to me, does that come from like the School Business Administrator Association standards or something, John?
Because to become a business administrator, you have to have a master's degree, and I didn't take all those courses.
Yeah.
mm.
See, all this while,
John, I think we're gonna have to let you go, John. I'm sorry.
So, I mean, it would seem to me that, economics,
Nope. It's 6A 9B 12.7. Of course, it's the last one they cite. To be eligible for the school business administrator CE, what's that? The certificate, the CE? The candidate shall hold a master's or higher degree and complete at least 18 credits of graduate or undergraduate study in the following areas: economics, law, accounting, organizational theory, management or administration, and finance.
You know what? Then if that's the case, then if you get a business administrator certificate, there has to be those components, because
It's in there. Yeah. It's
right
the degree.
has to be, because they're going to align their programs and their certificate with what's in the code. So
You did do that, John, right?
So I
According to the policy, it just restates statute for no good reason.
Yeah.
so I think that's pretty straightforward, but we got a little bit of a lesson on code, though, didn't we? All right, I wanted to talk about a school and facility naming. We have Strauss Esmes is has very scant text in it, but the West Orange policy is actually, and the reason I brought this up was my sense is that there may be a advocacy campaign coming down the pike to name one of our facilities, and it's not to say that it's not well intentioned, but I want to make sure that I wanted the board to review their policy to make sure that they felt that it was the right type of process. And, the Strauss Esme policy is there's nothing in it. I mean, it's a school building or facility may be named to memorialize the outstanding service of a school district employee or officer. And that's really it. And then when you look, I shared two with you, when you look at the one that came from Passaic, and I'm not suggesting we adopt Passaic's policy, but you see that it's, well, first off, it precludes naming after anyone who's alive.
Which is always a really good practice, by the way. Just having been a development director and knowing that, sometimes it looks like a good idea, and then there are things that happen down the road after the building's been named, and then it has to be renamed because there were some unsavory acts that had
Yeah.
occurred. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Jennifer on that take, because obviously there's a lot of funding and monetary items that go into renaming a school, and there's, and it's not just the building itself, it's all the logos, it's all the gear, right? Our spirit wear, things like that. It's so I think to Jennifer's point, if you went through all of took all those steps to do all that and spent all of this money to rename a school, and then something unsavory happens, and now, we have to rename the school again. I think, to Jennifer's point, deceased folks makes more sense.
I think I generally agree, although, I think that you might want to have some leeway. You could have a situation where there's somebody who's, quite aged and beloved and respected, and, you want to honor them while you still can, I would certainly agree about, younger folks, though, where there's lots of room for issues.
But we do cafeterias and auditorium.
Mhm.
It's not a whole school building.
Right. Right.
But
But-
even that, yeah.
So I'm sorry, Jen. So I thought these criteria suggested they were worth. So this is basically it goes to the board president. Board president decides whether it meets criteria to move it forward to for the board's consideration. So the historical significance of the contribution of the individual, family, or group, we'll say, to the Township of West Orange, public schools, or an individual school, the association of the individual, family, or group with the building or program to be named, and state, regional, national, or international recognition of the contributions and achievement of the individual, family, or group toward human betterment. I'm thinking that if you have a policy on renaming, you're probably gonna. I think it makes a lot of sense to have some procedural steps and criteria, because it protects against political pressure, or special interest. You have the protection of your policy. I think that's really helpful for the board.
Yeah.
And I would along those lines, though, definitely like the where it's worded about preserving the historical and traditions of the community. So I think there's a lot of history in West Orange, and a lot has gone through the school building. So I'd like to see that we keep something that in the protocols or in the process of keeping that in mind, historical nature of the building and the honor and tradition that it was originally named in as part of the West Orange community. I mean, yeah, everyone still calls Pleasantdale and Kelly, right? There's still the back and forth between those. So,
Yep.
I was going to bring that up. We wouldn't have a Kelly Elementary under this policy.
Right.
In the short nature of
Well, that's right. You wouldn't have named it after somebody, the astronauts, if they were,
this.
But if
It's
you
interesting.
put the deceased piece in, I mean, that's just one school of thought. I'm not married to it, but I think, to me, I agree, this needs to be built out a little more. I think just it talks about a service of a school district employee or officer, but in the case of Kelly, they were alumni. I think alumni are extremely important, and we need to look at them as that. And even those who may not have been who have graduated from our school, but they may have become, but feel that West Orange is their home, and this is where they want to, put some roots down and help the community. So,
I don't know
It's
about you.
interesting.
what I would want to avoid, though, is someone buying naming rights.
Well, that's the other piece of it. As a development director, you would never name a building without a financial contribution. It just, in higher education circles, that just, doesn't happen unless it's somebody who's, an emeritus faculty or something like that, but usually there's some sort of major gift that comes along with a naming right. And it's, and I think it's a practice that probably more and more public schools are going to have to lean towards when we're looking at closing budget gaps. So
Interesting that Passaic actually has one of its last things that they will not consider a nomination if the nominee has donated more than $250,000 to the district.
I just don't want to make it be that you can buy off the district, right? So that if I have $1 million and I want to have a building named after me, I'm going to give $1 million to the Board of Ed. And you know what, Ken, I would like you to name it the Merklinger School of Thought. Like,
which building would you like?
I think about this more along the lines of, if we have a cafeteria and kitchen that's badly in need of repair, and somebody wants to make a donation and you want to put up a plaque naming it the, Jane Smith Cafeteria and Kitchen, I would hate to see a policy saying, yeah, we don't work that way here.
Yeah, I mean, you could get science, labs with naming rights, and you could have the big pharmaceutical companies each have a, name plaque on the front of their door if you, you
I'd be
really
happy to
wanted
take some money for that. Sure.
Can I ask the board a question? It says in here, Passaic keeps it limited to their board. So you have a board committee and then it goes to the board. I mean, is that the way this board would want? I almost feel like that. Do you feel as if the process needs to be more inclusive?
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be good to have community input on it, not necessarily as the final decision, but definitely as stakeholders in it. There are some folks that are very tied to their school and would not want to see it renamed.
Elders at the school.
Right.
So maybe in the policy, something to the effect of, and I'm like wordsmith it, but that the board will solicit relevant stakeholder feedback to help inform the decision, right?
Yeah, that's general enough.
I mean, in terms of the in looking at the Passaic policy, obviously we're not talking about adopting a boilerplate, but when I looked at it, I felt like it had a lot of what the board might want, just in terms of criteria and procedural steps. Anything that you see in it that you absolutely would not? What about that, Ken? Number 5 under the committee should not consider any nominations if they fall into one of the categories below.
I'm not touching that.
I think it's problematic. I mean, again, I think under
I agree, but I'm not touching
under item number 5. Well, but again, we wouldn't have had Kelly Elementary, I think, under item number 5. And I get that there's some controversy.
You might have to rename it under item 1, 2 rather. Sorry, 2. No, where 3? The elected official one. Good Lord, sorry, I'm going blind.
Well, sure, and I did wonder about that. These things get complicated. I totally agree, and yet, if you start really tying your hands in a policy, then you don't allow humans a chance to make a decision about a situation. I mean, I don't really have an answer here, but I do think that, I mean, I would love to speak get a little insight into how they landed on this policy and what their discussions entailed, because
And what they ended up approving before somebody said, God, we need a policy so we don't have to do that again. Yeah.
These are so restrictive, unless we want to rename a school the Christopher Columbus School. And even that is controversial. I don't know who we're going to name a school after here. So.
Well, why don't I do this? This was not a deep dive of research on my part. I did a quick search. I found a policy that I thought would serve as a good opening for conversation, which I think this has. But why don't I do a little bit more research? Maybe identify a couple other boilerplates. Maybe see what kind of some guidance we can get from Strauss Esme, because their policy is a mess. I mean, it's nothing. So Although there may be some regulations too. There might be some more detailed regulations. But why don't next work session, I'll come with some more options to look at to help guide the conversation. That sound okay?
Mhm.
Great.
I had one other thing before, and then I would say my shtick is sort of complete, and then I would turn it back to the board. But now for the as is, now of course we adopted a number of as is, and I was going back to try and locate the policies on which I had received feedback on as is, and I have Jen, I have Ms. Tunnicliffe's. I have Terry's, and I have Ken's. Now that doesn't mean that you didn't give it to me. You might have it in your own records, but if you have a record of your feedback on as is policies, if you could maybe re-forward that to me, because I want to dive back into those policies that had edits and start working through cleaning those up, getting the Strauss Esme, getting consults as necessary, so we can bring the remainder of those forward.
Okay,
Right.
I'll double check that.
Thanks, Gary. Okay.
Yeah, I'll send mine over too.
Gotcha. And that was, I think that kind of catches us up in kind of but now of course we started diving into column 3, which were the blanks or options to select policy, rest must remain as is. And we had kind of suggested that everyone was going to review all. So, and I don't know the extent to which that's happened, but I don't know, maybe the board just wants to speak a little bit to, their process with that, the extent to which they've gotten into them, even if it's just simply you identified some policies that jumped out at you and you want me to just kind of like flag those for further review. But that's kind of where we are tonight, is on that third column, and anything that you want to bring forward at this time relative to those policies.
Gotcha. And these are the ones that that some of us have given you feedback on, or these are?
No,
Okay.
I haven't gotten any feedback on the third
Gotcha.
column.
I tried to go through them all. My problem is I can't always find the corresponding.
What's orange
Would it-
policy?
It's often
Would
the
it be easy?
Especially in the.
I seem to be able to navigate that pretty well. So would it be helpful if I matched them up for everyone?
Each other.
That
So
would be great,
Oh,
Charlotte.
sorry.
I wanted to say that in the bylaws in particular, I could not find some of the corresponding policies. So Cheryl, what were you saying? You're good at finding them?
Oh, no, I was saying I'm pretty good at navigating our West Orange, the ones that are on our Board of Ed page right now. So I can match them up with where we have a policy or pieces of that policy that matches with Strauss Esme. I can match them up for columns 3 and 4. So the as is, or the blank or options to select in policy, rest must remain as is, that's column 3.
Right.
And the ones typically content is unique to the district, column 4. I can match those up for everyone if that would be helpful.
So you have 0141 board member number and term.
I know we have it. I know it exists. I don't know it off the top of my head, but I'm just saying I'm happy to put that all together for everyone if that would be helpful.
That would be helpful. I've done as many as I could
Tremendously.
find, but I could let you know the ones I could not find. If you can locate them. You know, what I'd like to suggest as we go forward, and I just want to interject it now so I don't forget it later, is if we can start to clean everything up by number and go straight across, now that we will have gotten to that final column, Once we do that, then just to go back and make sure that we've got everything for bylaws, we've got everything for administration, and just work our way across. So I don't know how you feel about that, Cheryl, and everybody else. But for me, it was kind of overwhelming looking at, we've got some of this, some of this, some of this, to really go back and say, we've done all the bylaws are done. We've done all the 1000s. So what do you think of that idea?
I mean, I think that's what we've been kind of doing. And just some of the ones that, and I want to say, I thought Scott had or Liz had sent us an audit of all the ones that we've gone through.
But my point is, I counted, there are like 180 of them, including some of the ones we're doing tonight. We've been doing it by column. I'm suggesting that we go back once we finish that final column and then really go through and make sure that we've got all the bylaws done. Whether they're mandated, most wording can change as is.
Right.
Then we're working our way through the policy manual rather than across the columns. That's my suggestion.
Yeah, and I agree. I think there's the I want to say, you know, and the audit, it looks like it was prepared by Strauss Esme that Liz forwarded to us.
Yeah.
It looks like it has kind of what I think you're talking about, Terry, which is it has the bylaws, all the numbers, what the policy title is, and then what date we adopted it, and if it's been adopted or not adopted. There's a column that says not adopted yet. So I think they've actually done that for us already. And I could be wrong. If I'm reading this
I'm
the wrong way.
To that, but I'm talking about how we as a board do our work. Once we finish that last column, as an audit for ourselves, to go back and instead of doing it by column, to do it by.
Well, I see by domain.
By section.
By section,
Gotcha.
yeah.
The 1s, the 2s, and the 3s. You know, I just think that's a cleaner way as we move forward, rather than jumping around from column to column.
I mean, it would represent a change in our operating procedure, you know, which would, you know, we're kind of, you know, we'd have to now think about, you know, how we're breaking that up. And I mean, I know, like, keeping this process organized, I have to tell you, has been a pretty monumental undertaking for Liz and I. It's been very, very challenging to keep track of it. And I think we've managed, and through your own good work, to do that, where I feel like we're close. I think for, you know, where what would be helpful for me is I can focus on everything we've done thus far in making sure that I'm bringing these policies, you know, across the finish line with you. I think if the board could drill down into, and whether it's working in pairs or teams or however it may be, but just going through these last 2 columns and identifying any policies you feel are like, you know what, these look pretty straightforward, let's go with them. And these are ones where we want to talk further about or edits. You know, I think we could be, if we could kind of work contemporaneously on those 2 different tasks, I think we could get this done more quickly than you think.
So can I offer a suggestion? Maybe so I can match up columns 3 and 4 with where our current West Orange policies are. So everyone has the numbers, and then I don't know what the total count is of column 3 and 4. But whether we decide to break it up by board member to review, or if everyone just looks at them and pulls out the ones that stand out and we discuss those, and everything else is, you know, assumed to be okay, like we've done with some of the other policies, have those discussions, move them forward, make edits, whatever. And then to Terry's point, once those have gone through, that means we've completed columns 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then go back and just ensure that we've covered all the bylaws, all the section 1000s, all the section 2000s, which we should, if we've gone through all these 4 columns, we should have completed all 4 or every single policy. But just as a double check to Terry's point, after we've done this section. So, first step, I send out the list to everyone of what matches up with what. And then I don't know if there's a number of policy, and like I said, I haven't counted them, so I don't know how many are left.
It's roughly 100.
I'm counting them now.
It's
95.
roughly 100 in those last two columns together.
Right. They're
It's-
95.
Yeah, and I feel like
It's a lot
some
of
of them are pretty short, like maybe like a paragraph. I don't think there's, but however we want to break it up to review them, or if it's just a matter of, we each look at what stands out to us, and have those discussions like we've been doing, and pulling it out and questioning, we're having these discussions and then moving them forward, if we're all in agreement. And then once that's done and we've done the second readings, go back and just ensure we've covered everything.
And Cheryl, I can give you the ones that I've already matched up, so you don't
Okay.
have those.
Oh, that'd be great. Thank you.
There are just a few I can't find.
Okay.
And so I went through using Liz's list and my original list. And so there are about 180 yet to be approved. And columns 3 and 4, like Gary said, it's around 100, it's like 95 or something. So if we do come up with a plan for going over those last 95, and as I said, I went through those, but we can break them up. If we do want to work in teams, that would be fine. That's much easier.
Yeah, I mean, I personally, because the last column is unique to West Orange, I would prefer to go through them. Not that I don't trust everyone's opinions, but just for my own knowledge, just to see what's unique about it, and ensure that we're holding to traditions that, of West Orange, if that's what the case is in some of these. But I'm willing to work with whatever everyone wants to do.
Yeah.
And I also listed the dates of our policies when they were approved. So we go back to 2003. So it's time.
But it sounds like can we kind of divide and conquer on this, where I'll kind of journey out and start knocking off all the kind of the stuff that's still hanging out there, and board kind of move forward and kind of tackling this. And then once you get me the list of, hey, these are ones we want to pull aside and these are the ones we're comfortable approving, easy. Then next agenda meeting, next board meeting, we get the ones you're good with on for a first reading. We schedule a work session. We bring those flag policies forward to talk about. And I tell you what, we're actually a lot closer to being done with this than you think.
Yeah. And I think we could do a breakdown of, I just counted up all the columns in the as is, the column 3.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if somebody took bylaws, that could be one, because there's 16 policies to review in there. There's nothing in the 1,000 series. And then if somebody does 2,000 and 3,000, that is about 14 different policies. Then if somebody does, let's see, what did I think here? We would do, so if somebody did 8, 9, and the 8,000, 9,000, and 4,000 series, that'd be another person. And then somebody takes, let's see, 5,000 and the 7,000, and somebody takes the 6,000 and 8,000. 4 and 5. That's 5. There's 5 of us, and that's divided up relatively. Where each get, about 14 to 16 different policies or bylaws. So it's 1 for the bylaws. 2,000, 3,000 would be somebody, because there's 8 in the 2,000 and 6 in the 3,000 that need to be reviewed. Then somebody reviews the 9,000, 8,000, and 4,000. That's 14 policies between the 3 of those. And then the 5,000 and 7,000 would be another one, and then the 8 and 5, 6 and 6,000 and 8,000 series would be.
I think you've got 8,000 twice. You've got a group
Right, I
design
do.
at 4
So
as well.
sorry, and it would be the 4,000. Oh, you're right. Wait a minute. So then take the 4,000 out. Then somebody would be doing the 5. Let me see. They do 3 and. All right, so then just do 4 and 5,000 together, and then 6 and 7, and then 8 and 9. 8 and 9 is probably the least amount. That work?
Sounds reasonable.
So I think we need some structure and assignments here.
Did somebody write that down?
Yeah, I've memorized it all.
Okay, let's hear it.
I mean, I was going to ask, Jen, you went to the trouble of sort of parsing these out to a relatively equal number. I would be appreciative if you would break it up into 5 different groups and just send out assignments. Would you be willing to do that? And are the other members okay with that?
Is that all right? All right.
Terry's like, I already read all of these.
Did you? Do you?
I did, yeah.
Oh, okay. That column 3 and 4, or just 3?
3 and 4. I did 4 by accident, and then I realized I was supposed to be doing 3. So what was the breakdown again, Jen?
So it's the bylaws, and then there's nothing in the 1,000 series for column 3, and then 2,000 and 3,000 would be together. 4,000 and 5,000 series, and then 6,000, 7,000, and then 8 and 9. So the 8 and 9 has.
And you're doing 4 now?
And then that was column 3. So column 4 is.
There are only 33 of those.
Yeah, I had 35, but you may be right. I did a quick count.
Yeah. So Cheryl, I know you have a preference for those, right?
Which one?
Column 4.
Oh yeah, I just thought we were breaking it up by numbers, not necessarily by column 3 and 4. I mean, I was going to look through them all anyway, but.
But I thought you said you were most interested in what was unique to the district.
Right. But I'm saying, we're combining the 2 columns, correct? And it's someone's looking at.
Well, my list, the one I just gave you, was only column 3.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
I did not do column 4 yet. I have.
Gotcha.
Because that's how we were doing it all along, right?
Yep.
So we might as well do column 4, and then we have our homework assignment, and then we'll be done.
So
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
And for some of these, like in the bylaws 0164, it's in both columns, typically unique to the district and also blanks.
yeah, there's a couple of those.
Yeah, there are a few that are in both columns, so they don't need to be counted.
Yeah, there's 33 in column 4.
Right, that's what I said earlier.
I must have counted something twice then.
I've been looking at this stuff so long, I'm bleary-eyed. Mm. All right, so while Jen is doing that, do people have preferences in column 3, what you want to do? At least we can get that done.
I'll take
Bylaws,
whatever you want to give me.
Want to do
Um,
bylaws, Ken? Yeah.
Just go right down the, we can just go right down the page. So Ken, you have bylaws, Terry, you have 2,000 to 3,000 series, Gary, 4 to 5, Jennifer, 6 to 7, and myself, 8 to 9.
That's what I like. Take charge, Cheryl.
all right,
We're
I'm
gonna
good
need
with that.
policy,
And
folks.
asking people if they have a preference, and you go right ahead and assign. Go, girl.
Wait, Ken's doing bylaws?
Whatever. Sure.
Sometimes,
Can you repeat that?
sometimes
So
it's
I'm doing
necessary.
7 and 8.
Yeah, so Ken's got bylaws.
Yep.
Terry's got the 2 to 3,000 series. Gary has the 4 to 5,000 series. Jen, you have the 6 to 7,000 series, and I have the 8 to 9,000 series.
Okay, got it. Great.
All right, and then we've just got a
And that's for
to
both.
column 4. Oh, is that just column 3 or is that both?
That was just column 3. Column 4 has 33 that are unique to West Orange. But to, I think Terry mentioned, there are some that also fall and are checked off for column 3 as well. There's only a handful.
Can we just take the same ones that we're doing for the policy numbers? This way it makes it easier.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We just need, do you want me to handle the 1,000 series then? Because I think that one didn't have anything in the column 3, but has 5 of them, I think, in the.
Well, Ken could take those because he only has the bylaws.
Got all the bylaws, and that's like 16 different policy pieces of that. Are you okay with that? I don't know. I didn't look at how thick, voluminous they were. I was just looking at how many, just based
Well,
on,
there are only 4 in the 4th column, so.
right. No, I just meant though, there's 16 bylaws under column 3 that he has to go through.
Right, but only 4 in the column 4.
Okay, that's fine.
So,
All right, so we're adding the 1,000s from column 4.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
so what's next? Where are we?
All right.
And those need to
Are
be
you-
commented on and ready by what date?
First thing in the
Let's-
morning, Rothstein.
You know, let's look at the calendar and you know, and try and map out a little bit of a timeline here. John, we have the December 7th board meeting. I think realistically, the only policies that you'll probably see on the December 7th board meeting are those handful of mandateds. Now, the next board meeting after that is the reorg. We're going on the 21st. Okay. So the 21st is certainly an opportunity. December's a tough month. I mean, you know, I don't know if you'll want to, I mean, I know you don't want to, but you know, would you consider it prudent to schedule another work session between the board meeting on the 7th and the 21st?
I I think if we really do our homework and we're really prepared, and even in advance, we can talk about the ones that we don't have a problem with.
Mhm.
If we do have a problem, do it early on so we're not spending this time. And I would be willing to do it.
Yeah, I would be too. I think it's important that we.
Okay,
do
so
that.
just a thought before it leaves my brain. Going back to Mr. Rothstein's question about timeline,
There's an
what,
echo.
what do you think is realistic for, kind of just going through and saying, I'm okay with this policy, pretty boilerplate, this one, and getting me that feedback? How long do you think you would need to do that? You mute, Terry.
Tomorrow.
Oh, yeah?
I
Wow.
did them all yesterday and today because I thought I had to do them all.
Gotcha. How about December 1st?
I was gonna say, I mean, with the kind of the Thanksgiving weekend coming up and being that we're kind of limited on what we can do for Thanksgiving, I can say December 1st would probably be.
Say December 1st?
And this is a win-win. I could tell my family I can't talk to them on Thanksgiving because I have to read policies. So I've got my out.
You know what? It's a silver lining. Silver linings everywhere, Mr. Rothstein. So that's good, because then what that means is that that we can potentially do some first readings of these third column policies that are you feel are set, and on the 7th. And then we can do potentially second readings of some on our workshop meeting. So the question is what date, what do you think would be what might be a good candidate for a date here in late
Well,
December?
So Hanukkah begins on Thursday, the 10th, December 10th. So I just want to be mindful of that for folks that may want to, because assuming we're still on online or on Zoom versus in person. So I just want to be mindful of that.
And that's, how many days is Hanukkah? 8 days. So that would bring us to the 18th. That would bring us to the 18th, which is.
I mean, the first night, but could we
I don't know if that's a.
Yeah, I'm with Cheryl. I don't think any night would be okay. The first night, it would be nice to not hold something, but other than that, I think.
Okay. All right. So then we have, well, there's a curriculum instruction town hall on the Wednesday. How about Tuesday the 15th? And maybe we can maybe we can do a little send off for John that night too.
Yeah, that would be nice.
He doesn't want anything. We're going to do it anyway.
And we were also talking about another town hall for ourselves at some point too.
Yeah, you have to have your budget town hall.
Yes.
All right, so John, you making note of that, the 15th? Thank you, sir. 6 o'clock. And make a note on that, John, for public to be, yeah, I'll talk to John about that. Yeah. Okay, so I think we're in a good place, folks. So feel like we've gotten up the beach a bit.
Right.
Yeah.
I just want to remind Cheryl that I'm going to send her the numbers, that, and then you're going to get that out to everybody.
Yep.
Okay, great.
I just want to remind Mr. Rothstein that he's not going to be speaking to his family. He's going to be reading policies.
I've already sent out a text message to every one of my family, so we're good. You mentioned a curriculum town hall.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I have that on my calendar.
Yeah, it just got hatched this week.
Got it. Okay.
It's the 16th. I don't believe it's actually been publicized yet publicly.
though we did confirm our facilitator. Yes, it's going to be Wednesday, the 16th, 6:15 to 8. That'll be Mrs. Demendez and the curricular supervisors, providing overviews of their areas, curriculum, instruction, Q&As. So
Great, thank you.
And what
welcome.
time did you say that was, Doc?
It looks like on here it says 6:15, but they might have that might be the pre-session. But in that ball, 6:30-ish.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then do we want to set a night for the budget town hall too while we're at it? We can go for the 17th and we'll have the trifecta of the 15th, 16th, 17th, the back-to-back board meetings.
It's not a busy month, so I think that's probably a good idea.
The Raiders are playing Thursday night, the 17th. So I'm sorry, guys.
I'll take it.
You were like running out of time.
No, right?
Are he doing his toy thing this year? Anyone know?
The one Ron does?
Yeah.
I texted him a while ago to ask him, and he said he'd get back to me. I wasn't sure exactly what they were doing. They were going to do something, but
Just because I feel like it's usually around that general time.
So yeah, it's usually the first or second Thursday of December, but being that Hanukkah is on the 10th, I'm going to assume that it wouldn't be that date. And I know he was looking to do something outdoors, tent wise or whatever. So I don't have details yet on that, but seeing as December 3rd is coming up very quick, I don't think that that's the date. So.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to derail actually the idea of the 17th with a joke about being facetious about it not being busy month. I mean, listen, I'm in, what is it? In for a penny, in for a pound. So, we want to roll it on the 17th. I'm in,
Well, what's the
the 14th.
I know we haven't gotten into the budget discussions completely just yet, but or I'm not sure what the plan was on the agenda for that, but timeline wise, what do we have an idea of when things have to be in? I mean, obviously we want to get the feedback from the community, so just in terms of trying to plan that out, like when is our next, I want to say, budget discussion planned for, that we would want to plan the community event, town hall, in advance of that?
Yeah, so I think that the conversation we're going to have tonight, and I'm actually glad to see a few members, a few participants sticking with us here from the community to hear this, because this was really Mr. Calavano's and my objective for the conversation tonight was really to orient the board to some of the significant financial challenges that are ahead of us in this budget cycle, and important for the community to be aware of that. And so, of course, the purpose of that town hall for the board is in the board's hands to determine. But just my 2 cents on it is if we're making tough decisions about what, and we're going to talk about the millions that we need to find, what are your priorities? What are things that you absolutely positively would not want to see go, right? So we can at least, as the board, can at least start to understand what are the high priorities for the community, because they're going to be some tough decisions, and so that's a one possible focus for that conversation and solicitation of feedback from the community, for that budget town hall.
And so the ball is already rolling.
Yes. So right. So basically, thank you for sometimes I'm not even sure at this point in time of the day. The screen piece, like I don't even half the time know if I'm actually even speaking coherently. But right. So this is typically the time, where we would start to activate our internal procedures for pushing out, pushing out guidance to principals, guidance to department supervisors. In the past, we've used a zero-based budget, which actually turned into a $3.5 million increase. Really wasn't much zero about it. And start that process. So incidentally, that didn't end up being a net expenditure of 3.5. We probably ended up cutting almost all of that, right, John? It ended up being really nothing, no increases. But the reason why Mr. Calavano and I wanted to bring this conversation to the board now is to look at some of these kind of macro pieces and say, instead of having the conversation about what you're comfortable with tax levy or non-tax levy, the process is done. Let's have that conversation now, because then we really know, we have a better sense of what our revenues are that we can plan the budget around, as opposed to planning it around not knowing what that is and getting late stage of the game and then having to cut more. So that was really the idea of starting the conversation here, to get a sense of where you'd like to come in at as far as tax levy, as far as bank cap, and then we can project out our revenues on the front end of the process, not on the back. So, if there weren't any other questions, maybe Mr. Calavano, you want to talk to the board about kind of how we approach this from the different models, and maybe walk them through the documents and, some key highlights from those documents?
Sure. Let's start with the 11 by 17 spreadsheet, which are the expenditures.
We on attachment 1, John?
Attachment 1. So on the left side, you'll see different categories by custodial, grounds, nursing, registration office, bilingual, basic skills, really by program. And on the upper top, going across, you'll see salaries, purchase services, maintenance, tuition, phone, etc. So what we did was we plugged in our current budget, the original budget, not the budget that exists today, because we had to make transfers. So we took the original budget and we said, okay, look at the salary column down below. What percentage do you think we're going to settle with the contracts? So we put a number in there, and then it gave us what the new number would be for the upcoming budget. And we did it across the board. We did benefits. So at this time, the benefits looks like about 11%. We're very early in the stage. And when I say early, we're very early. So a lot of these numbers will probably change as we go through the upcoming months. But we pushed the broker, said, okay, we need numbers now. What are you looking at? So he's looking at 11%. And part of that 11%, New Jersey, a law just was signed on July 31st that will put in on all plans moving forward as of January 1st, 2021, a potential tax equaling a percentage of 2.5 to 3.5%. So he's right now anticipating that in this number. One of the suggestions that our broker has brought to us is now it's time to look at self-insurance. If we go self-insurance, we can eliminate that 2.5 to 3.5% tax. You'll see we put a small increase in for purchase services, maintenance, our tuition. That's out of district tuition. That's a rough number right now, 8%. I can tell you when we received the budgeted numbers from the Department of Ed, there are schools going up 15%. While we have a 2% cap, the private schools, they have 15% increase, 20% increase. So right now we're looking at an 8% increase. And then our insurance, which is property and casualty, we're looking at an 8.4% increase. Our transportation, we're struggling a little bit with that. Hunterdon is our primary carrier for transporting our children. They have been taking a loss the last 3 years. The first year was roughly $500 plus $1,000. The second year was a little over $400,000. And this past year, it's being audited, and they're thinking it's about $117,000. Their board can no longer continue providing the service at a deficit. So they gave us an estimated increase for next year, and then it'll be another increase the following year to maintain our relationship. Again, early number. We have meetings set up with their business administrators to review their numbers, and hopefully we can come up with a better number. And then we looked at the heating and electric, so we anticipate an increase there. And the rest of the categories like supplies and textbooks, the phone postage, we anticipated no increase. So with that all in mind, there is a $9.4 million increase from our original budget from the current year to our proposed budget, just on these categories where we are today. This is not even looking at any cuts or anything else. It's just taking some major categories and projecting out. So if you go to the next attachment, number 2. Now we're on the revenues. Now we're.
John, did you just want to, just for the folks who are on the call, and maybe I missed it, just highlight what that deficit is? Did I miss that?
The increase in the expenditures is $9.4 million. So now we have to look at the revenue side to see what the shortfall is going to be. So if you go to attachment 2, and you'll notice there are 6 attachments. The first 3, and I'll just talk about certain categories. On all of them, the tax, if you look at the actual of 2021, our tax levy was $140,398,739. We used bank cap of $1,092,440. We also, at one point in the process, if you look at equalization aid, and you look at the increase column, you'll see an increase of $1,552,838. We actually received an increase in our state aid. And when we finalized the budget, that increase was part of our finalized budget. That represents the additional funding that the state owes us because we've been underfunded in state aid all these years. So each year they're trying to catch up. And this 1.5 represents our share from last year, or the current year that we're in now. July rolls around, and the governor, because of COVID, the governor turned around and asked all school districts, you're sending that back to us. You need to cut that from your budget. So we had to make an additional cut of $1.5 million. So you'll see in a couple of like the first 3, that will include the state aid of 1.552 for the upcoming school year, because I'm hoping we'll at least get that back. I'm not sure if we'll be able to get that back, plus our next year's, the share that we should be receiving, but hopefully he'll restore to 1.5. And the last 3 do not include that 1.552. So if you're looking at number 2, the attachment, so you'll see preliminary for 21-22 column and then the actuals. So you'll see some of the revenues, like other LEAs for tuition. We're not receiving as much as we did in the past. So, we're trying to be cautious on what we're budgeting. State aid, you'll see just the increase of that $1,552,000. And then you'll also see on the bottom a reduction in budgeted fund balance. One of our budget goals is to continually reduce the reliance on using fund balance. A couple of years ago, we were at $2.5 million each year that we would put into the budget to balance the budget. Each year, we were trying to reduce it by $250,000. So you'll see that in each of these worksheets that we're reducing that amount by $250,000.
John,
So,
can you just elaborate a little bit on what that means to be using? So what you're saying is that historically, our district has utilized fund balance to balance the budget.
correct.
Can you explain what that means?
So that means each district's allowed to carry 2% of a formula, which is 2% of your budget in fund balance as a reserve. So in case, well, A, you need it for cash flow reasons. And 2, if you have an emergency during a year, you can actually pull money out of the fund balance to offset that expenditure. For years, our district, we never made the 2%. And then when you look at having a commitment each year of taking 2.5, that means whatever we're able to close the school year out and whatever drops to the bottom line, usually that amount we have to just put into the following year's budget. So we can never go to fund balance. We've never had a 2% fund balance. Also, it also hurts our bond rating for Moody's. So we go out for a bond issue and our rating is lower, that means we get a higher interest rate. So that actually hurt us last time because our fund balance was so low. So our goal is to increase that fund balance to at least the 2%. And anything above the 2%, we have an option at June 30th to move that money into capital reserve. Again, another fund that we should have a couple $1 million in, and presently we have about $380-some thousand left. The last 4 years, we had $0 in that fund. So when you look at this first sheet, you'll see up on top a 0 in the percentage increase. So if you're looking at a 0% increase in your tax levy, and if we anticipate a 1.552, that additional funding that we're going to receive from the state, we're looking at an $8 million cut to balance our budget. And that's using 1.750 from fund balance.
You want to stop for questions on just that first,
Sure.
that first contingency?
Sure.
John, I thought the most recent health insurance news was that supposedly this new plan was going to save everybody a ton of money. Not so much.
No, we're actually, we're still in open enrollment, so we'll know exactly what the hit's going to be. I think the more employees that go into this new plan, it'll benefit the employee by less contributions. It'll hurt us because we're losing those contributions. So the amount that we're going to save from premium will not offset the loss of contributions. The loss of contributions are going to be higher than the savings in the premium.
That's certainly not the way they sold it when they were, talking about this when it was in the legislature still. Nice.
Right. But I still think it's a benefit for the employee. And that's what it was all about, for benefiting employees. So we won't know that number until we have about 217 employees still outstanding to make a decision on if they're going to go into the new plan.
So John, explain a little bit more. Maybe I missed this. You made a statement, we've never been able to reach the 2% in the fund balance. So why would that be that we've never been able to do that? And is this over a period of years, or what?
Because what occurs each budget cycle is we rely on putting $2.5 million from fund balance into the following year's budget.
And by doing that, it reduces the tax burden because you're not levying as much.
That's one point. Or if you didn't put the 2.5 in a budget, you'd have to make $2.5 million worth of cuts.
Right.
So it's just another revenue source.
Right.
So over the years, as budgets were developed, that never happened. Is that what you're saying?
We never achieved the 2% over the years, correct. Our goal now is to achieve the 2%. So that's why we're reducing the amount of fund balance that we use to offset, to put it into the budget, to balance the budget.
So this has been a pattern over time, and so now
Correct.
we're trying to correct that.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay.
And because of the situation of where the state is in, do you think it's likely that we're going to get that 1.5 back?
I don't know. It's too early to tell.
Yeah.
So I worked up schedules with it and without it.
Okay. Which one has it without? Is it the, oh, I
It'll
see.
be starting number 5.
Yeah, okay, 5, 6, and 7, got it.
So when you look at the first 3, the number 2, number 3, number 4, number 2 represents a 0% increase in the tax levy.
Yep,
Number 3 represents a 2% in the tax levy with no use of bank cap. Remember, we used $1,092,440. If we do not decide to use that same number, that amount, but we just increase the cap by 2%, the net is only a 1.23% increase in tax levy.
mhm,
And then the last schedule is if we use 2%, the 2% cap, and we use exactly the same number that we did for bank cap, it's just a 2% net. So if we were to go 2% increase and use same amount of cap, we would still see a $5.2 million cut that we would have to make to balance the budget. And now remember cap, if we're utilizing 1,092,092, we actually have $3.4 million that we can utilize from bank cap this upcoming school year. If we don't use it, or any portion we don't use, we'll lose it. And that doesn't mean that we have funding available for us. That just, it says to us that we're allowed to go over the 2% cap. And it's a direct hit on the taxpayer because it's just increasing your tax levy.
But John, is that bank cap is there because in previous years we were below cap?
That's correct.
Right.
That's correct. And that's another reason why it's not a good idea to go below cap. Because eventually it's going to catch you. And then when it does catch you, you don't want to just have a spike. So at that point, you don't end up using all of it. You end up losing it, and then you end up making a lot of cuts. And then when you look at number 5, number 6, number 7, same thing, 0%, 2% in tax levy, but no bank cap, and 2% of the tax levy and the bank cap with no state aid. So if we take the 2%, we decide we're going to go to 2%.
We're on
And
number 7 right now, John?
Number 7, right.
Yeah.
And if we don't have the additional state aid, now we're looking at a $6.7 million cut.
So the challenge is that, I'm sorry, sure. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just say, so just in layman's terms, what is that on 7, what would be the implication for the taxpayers of West Orange?
I don't know. I'm waiting for the new rateable so I can determine what the impact will be.
But would it be, I guess the question is more, not necessarily a specific number, but would we be seeing an increase to taxes?
Oh, absolutely.
Right. So, I mean, I think that's, and what's so hard here, and you're seeing it, is trying to develop a budget with merely estimates of expenses and estimates of revenues, because we really, the state aid revenue it's an unknown. And, and on the expense side, it's even more nebulous because, we've erred on the side of what we think is liberal as far as the increases, but it could be more than that. It could be less. But I think it's safe to say that when you look at it at 2%, that 7 is 2% no bank cap, right?
Yes.
No, 7 is 2% with the
With bank cap.
92, right?
Right. So,
Wherever we are today, yeah. With
right.
bank
So
cap.
so if we've estimated correctly, then the best case scenario for cuts is $6.75 million.
It's a lot of money.
5 point, yeah, and if we have the state aid.
5.2 if we get the additional state aid.
Right.
Sorry.
Now, we're not taking into account what we're going to raise by renaming schools and collecting cash for that, so.
And unfortunately, staffing is always going to be the hit. That's where the money is.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so to Terry's point, I mean, I know one of the key factors for West Orange is we don't want to change the landscape of our curriculum or our schools. So then it's getting creative as to where all those cuts are going to have to come from. Just because I live and breathe in benefits every day. John, you mentioned about going to the self-funded plan, or I guess
Yes.
the brokers are pushing towards that. And I'm assuming that's the state plan that they want us to go to, the self-insured state plan. Is that what they're?
No, it would be the state plan because the state plan has to be equal to or better than our
Right.
benefits, and they're not. So it's just, we're looking just to be self-funded within our own
Just
plan.
self-funded.
Yes.
And with that, there would be runoff claims that we'd have to pay. And we don't know what that would look like, the numbers for that.
No.
And
we also,
I'm sorry, John.
I'm sorry. We also looked at supplies and textbooks and said, okay, maybe that's an area we can cut. So the total throughout the entire district, and I'm talking all supply accounts, is about $4 million. So if we say, okay, let's cut 10% of that, that's only $400,000. That doesn't really get us too much either, but it does help.
So I guess the other, kind of overarching question that I think what we may get from the community is, if we're not back in our schools, do we need all these supplies? Or, what are we funding in the schools? because I would expect that more of our expenses would be in technology and ensuring that we have, if we're not going back to hybrid, if we're not going to brick and mortar, I mean, obviously I would hope that we are, and that we're going back on site. So how do we plan for plan A? We're out of school until next September, or plan B, we go back in January or December, whenever, numbers counts come down and we can get back in.
Well, mind if I take that one, John? Well, I think that our entry into school this year and the degree to which we're able to, kind of save money would really only be relevant in terms of how much money we could carry over into the next fiscal year in our reserves, which would be, we'd reserve for either emergency or capital reserve, capital improvements. I think we're building this budget based upon the fact that we will be back in school next year. I certainly hope so. If nothing else, make it a self-fulfilling prophecy and budget that we're going to be in for next year. I think what happens now, John, correct me if I'm wrong. Technology is that's part of that 4 million technology supplies.
Yes.
Right. So that's inclusive of hardware, software, and purchase services, or no, that's a separate line.
No, that's separate.
So I mean, I think the reality of it is that we can only carve down that small percentage of our budget before it becomes really difficult for us to actually do what we're here to do, not from a staffing standpoint, just from a material standpoint. I mean, the reality of it is that last year's budget, we got very creative as it related to cuts. And because, people know, like, we raised taxes, but we also cut like 3 or 4, or I don't even know, John, how much did we end up cutting from that budget from start to finish? I mean, it was millions. It was millions of dollars. And we did hit staff a little bit, but we avoided hitting the classroom. There are some other inefficiencies there, but we're talking, I mean, if it's another 1.5, Mr. Alper, and we can get it down to 5 and change, we can probably figure it out without it being too dramatic. But you go no state aid, and we're talking $7-8 million. It's going to be virtually impossible to not change the landscape in some way. And the question becomes, what do we want this revised landscape to look like? Because we will not be able to employ all the people that we employ if we have to cut $7 or $8 million. And that is the harsh truth of it. So I guess it's really, I think what, in addition to just a big picture view of it, in terms of, working towards, I think what I'm getting is we're trying to minimize any kind of tax increases on the public, right? That's kind of our charge here.
Yes, I would say that's a priority.
Okay.
I just have a question for Mr. Calavano. With our transportation, our department does the routes. Is that correct?
Actually, we developed the routes.
Right. Now, do we just roll those over every year? Do we do a self-audit to see if we can find some efficiencies in the routes?
We work on efficiency every year.
Every year. So there's no chance.
And actually, Hunterdon County will work with us since they're the ones that are actually driving the route.
Now we do, Mr. Calavano, correct me if I'm wrong, we offer a fair amount of hazardous, like courtesy busing, hazardous route busing.
Yes.
Which is nice, but it's not required, in other words, zones.
Can you explain what that is?
Sure. So these are residences that are not beyond the statutory required distance to qualify for busing. They're within that radius, so I think it's the high school, it's 2 miles. And I think it's 2 miles for the high school. So they were within that 2 miles, but the residence is located in such a place that it's been deemed hazardous for pedestrian traffic. And so we provide courtesy busing for those students for a safety perspective. You know,
Doesn't
it's
seem like,
actually-
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say that doesn't seem like a super great place to look for cuts.
right. There really aren't any good places to look for guts, you know. Now you could start having conversations about, privatization, right? Or partial privatization. You know, they're never popular conversations, but when it's, and this is when we start to talk about priorities and in the community is well, we know you don't want to privatize, but do you want to only be offered 2 world languages instead of 4? Like these are the kinds of conversations and the kind of decisions that we have to start conversations we have to start having with the public to understand where they stand on it.
So to that point or that example, Scott, are we able to get as we're going through the budget process, the courses that we offer and the enrollment of students in each of those courses?
Sure, sure, and absolutely, and I think.
And that's not to say that I want to cut anything. I'm just curious. I mean, if we have a class that's just, maybe 5 students versus a class that's 25 and push comes to shove, we may have to make some of these difficult decisions. And I want the community to be aware of that that's something we might have to do given the circumstances. So I would just be curious.
It's interesting because there's a couple things that come up when you talk about that. One is some of your lesser enrolled courses tend to be some of your more specialized courses on the higher levels in high school, like your higher level Cisco programming courses and, maybe some of your AP courses. And when we start looking at these numbers, because we did look last year to see where we could kind of compress. And, you have to cut enough of those whereby it actually turns into a staff line. And then you start to kind of look at this and go, so basically we took like 5 really unique courses away and we saved $70,000, right? And so it becomes this kind of cost benefit where it's almost kind of like you need to look places where you can get like chunks of change. Listen, I'm stating this publicly. I'm saying this is what I support this, but some of the comprehensive high schools, which are terrific, but that also have county vocational schools where they offer, the same technical programs that we offer. That's places where some people are looking, even though they're a absolutely brilliant part of our program, our auto shop, our wood shop. But those we're paying county taxes to run vocational schools in the county, and our kids are not taking advantage of and benefiting them. So that's another place. So, but none of these things are great. People don't feel good about them, but it becomes what's the lesser of the bad options, really. But that's our job to start being creative and try and look at all options and look at how we can minimize impact. And this was more to kind of get to kind of take the board's temperature on and kind of figured we were coming from a fiscal conservatism approach. Just wanted to confirm that. And now we can kind of go to the drawing board and start seeing where we can save and have the least impact.
Or we can just get more state aid.
Right. That's true. And we might. You never know. You never know. I think it's highly unlikely based upon what's happened with the economy and rents and store revenues and things of that nature. But you never know. You never know.
I just wanted to mention now that we have discovered virtual learning. I wonder how school districts are going to approach the fact that some students would prefer to do that? And might that be an option, something that we're looking at for some of those smaller class sizes? And even, you know, we heard about school districts who might want to merge for some of those small specialty classes, so that maybe a teacher in a neighboring district is teaching that course and our kids are a part of it on a virtual basis. So
There's no question. Ms. Tunnicliffe and I had an interesting conversation about that, and there's no question that virtual learning has, and how we've seen, and as many kids, do better within the brick and mortar setting. We have a good number of kids, particularly on the high school, who actually really prefer learning virtually. And so you think about this kind of more of a hybrid model, whereby, and I don't mean hybrid but hybrid, where you have some students that are almost as we establish a virtual high school that operates side by side with a brick and mortar high school. And you had virtual teachers, and what kind of savings could that potentially realize for a district? Unfortunately, I think it's hard to really wrap our heads around that right now, because we're still in damage control and survival mode. And obviously establishing a virtual high school side by side with a brick and mortar high school is probably a multi-year process of planning and designing and developing. But I think there could be some real savings on the secondary level with following more of a college model. And that's really what the colleges have been doing, right, Ms. Tunnicliffe? For, the distance learning paradigm has been in higher ed for some time. And correct me if I'm wrong, there was definitely a fiscal imperative behind that, correct?
Yeah. And you can take, because, the other thing is you can take in out-of-state students without having the space and those kinds of who are paying out-of-state tuition for those types of things. So you're able to open your model up to others who are not in the general community or aren't staying on campus.
I think what I was wondering is along those lines, teaching a course virtually as opposed to brick and mortar doesn't necessarily save any money. Our greatest expense is still the educator, who we still need running that class. But if
unless, Mr. Rothstein, the virtual teacher in the negotiation process, if they were voluntarily assigned to a virtual slot, perhaps there would be a differentiated pay scale for a virtual teacher.
Possibly, or where my head was going, if we can identify that there are other districts that would like to send students to a course like that, and we can charge tuition.
Sure.
And now, instead of 5 students at West Orange on a list that we're considering cutting, we now have a virtual course that has 40 students in it, 35 of them paying into the district for what we're able to offer.
Absolutely.
I
think that gets a little hairy, because then you start looking at scores and reporting, right, and residency issues. So I think it's not something to immediately, I'm not saying that we shouldn't think of it, but I think we have to be careful about how, if we were to go down that route, what the implications it has downstream. I think, in theory, it sounds great, right? We can offer all these courses and we can do it virtually, and so can come from this district, and that this person can go to that district. But then I think you start leaning into other issues that we may not see that are downstream effects. So I just want to be mindful and careful before going too far down that hole.
Right. So it's suffice to say, it's, I think that there's, and the other thing is the idea of, do these virtual students, need to be on campus every day?
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a percentage of your student body that's only on campus 2 days a week, do you need the same number of staff members to service them, or not? And so I think there's there's also option two in code. It's actually referred to as individualized student learning experiences in code. It's colloquially called option 2, but basically it gives students the latitude to design their own, ISLEs and submit them to the school district
for approval for credit. So, and it's actually, if you look at our in our graduation policy, you'll see that. And a lot of districts have moved in that direction of offering option 2 for phys ed, or, let's say you're in Hebrew school and an option 2 for world language if you're taking Hebrew school on Saturdays. So there's a lot, the code actually provides latitude for schools whereby a student literally would not have to actually ever step foot in a building and could actually get a high school degree just simply by option 2 if they were motivated enough. So that's something to consider as well. There are some school districts that have pretty robust option 2 programs, South Brunswick is being one of them.
That's interesting. Do they pair you with like a mentor through that is somebody based at the high school, or a guidance counselor, or is it completely on your own?
Well, I think, typically there's 2 sides to that. Typically on the student side, there would typically be some sort of an ombudsman, if you will, to their process on their side. And maybe that's their Hebrew school instructor, maybe that's their violin teacher, maybe that's their ballet teacher or their piano teacher. But then there is definitely an accountability mechanism on the school side. And that's really where the devil's in the details there, is in terms of the oversight and accountability on the school side. It really does require some kind of a cadre of human resources on the school side to review the applications or the proposals, and then to audit those proposals and the assessment mechanisms to ensure that it's aligned with the code, in that it meets the standards of that course and has a robust assessment component to demonstrate that the students master those standards.
Okay, that's good. If I can share with my colleagues here how our conversation came about that day, where we started talking about being able to have, now that we know we can do virtual, it came out of a conversation about wanting to, I was thinking about how do we get, full-time preschool to help. And one of the things I was thinking of, that if we are able to do a successful virtual, format for some of our high school students who would want that would then free up room, maybe a wing of the high school or something, where we could get a full day preschool program within the, thinking really creatively out of the box, that there's, how can we look at the problem? Because we know we don't have enough money to do another building. When you look at the budget like this, it's just, that's not a reality. When you look at what the taxpayers are paying right now, that's not gonna happen. How else can we get that and achieve that? By doing things more creatively. So it was one of the kind of how that conversation came about. So I just wanted to share that with all of you.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea.
So
it doesn't necessarily, these are, I think, multi-year strategies. I think, this year, we're going to have to do it the old fashioned way, which is just trying to find efficiencies, within our budget. And I think I'm always optimistic. And I think it's not, there's going to be some tough decisions, but again, I think really trying to put a critical eye on really impacting the student experience as little as possible will always be our first goal,
Before we forget, did we actually pick a date for the town hall? Did I miss that? Did we select a date?
I don't believe we
it was
did.
floated, but I don't think we confirmed it.
Is that something we want to do?
Well, isn't it? I think it's a board goal, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
No, I mean, set the date.
Oh.
We had no choice.
I mean, unfortunately, I think we've already got 2 things scheduled the week of the 14th, but we're already getting very close to holiday time. I don't think we can do anything that following week. We've got a meeting Monday, the 20th, and if we're looking at the 21st, 22nd, 23rd, we're just not going to have attendance. So I don't think that week helps any. And the week of the 7th may just be too early. It may come up too quickly for us.
And Hanukkah's the 10th.
The first night is the 10th.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, unless we did that week of the 7th, we've got a meeting the 7th.
Right.
I suppose we could do the 8th or the 9th if we think we can pull ourselves together that quickly to hold that meeting. Otherwise, I think we need to look at either the 14th, Monday the 14th, or Thursday the 17th, in a week when there's already a lot going on.
Yeah, what did we just set the 15th for?
The 15th and the 16th. Yeah, 15th will be the
so-
policy work session. The 16th will be the curriculum.
Yes,
town hall.
maybe
Taking a
we
step
could look at
back.
the 15th.
Just taking a step back with the intent of the town hall. So what is it that we're looking to accomplish? Because I think that plays into, in regards to what Gary's saying about being able to pull it together. If we're looking for feedback, we probably can do it the week of the 7th, either the 8th or 9th. If we think that it's going to be more involved, then we probably have to look at the week of the 13th, which leaves us with either the 14th or 17th.
I mean, so much of the information we have at this point is so preliminary. I think your real purpose is to just, kind of listen and say, what's important to you, what can't we cut, that sort of thing. And, you could do that now, essentially.
Right.
So yeah, maybe we should look at that week of the 7th.
But we only have the 8th, right?
8th or 9th.
Well, does
Hanukkah.
something happen in the evening of the 9th or no?
Or can we we can't do the 8th?
I can.
Well,
do
we
it.
have the meeting on the 7th,
Yeah.
so it'd be back-to-back nights. Not that it's
Right.
The only another option is if we don't do that policy workshop on the 15th, since we've already agreed to that date. So it would either have to be the 8th or that next week.
what was the 9th out?
Well, is that the eve of Hanukkah?
Hanukkah begins on sunset on the 10th.
So the 9th would be all right.
Right, the 9th would be fine.
Well, I'm good for the 9th. John, is that time for you to do whatever we need to do to be ready?
Yes. Plenty of time.
All right, we'll pick a time and let us know.
Do you want to pick the time now so I can put the advertisement
Sure.
together?
Could we do like 6:30
Yeah, 6:30 sounds good to me.
or
Y'all good?
7? 6:30 or 7?
I think 7, I mean, I just, for something like that, I think 7 gives parents
Give
and
people
working
extra time.
folks
Sure.
time to get kids dinner done and home from this, I should say home from the city. Nobody's from the city.
Oh, you're living in the
All right,
olden days. Aw.
There are some people that have to go into offices.
So
Those
for those
lucky
people, yeah, I think 7's good
Take me with you.
for a parent event.
Who's putting together the plan for that meeting and the materials?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's John and I. So what we'll do is we'll put together basically a high level budget view. I know John will be gone, but at that point, right, the 9th.
He is?
Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh, are we talking about December 9th?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, December 9th. Okay. All right. So yeah, we'll do.
Nice save.
We'll put together a little razzle dazzle, little 30,000 foot view of the budget, kind of like we did here, but a little bit more polished. And we're not going to show these docs because these are just working budget docs, but we can kind of talk in broad brushstrokes about some of the expenses and things. And then, then I think we kind of turn it over to the board, and maybe each of you, has a brief statement about your view on the budgeting process, you know, what you're going to try and do, you know, and then, you know, then we just kind of open it up to people to ask questions, you know. Pretty straightforward.
Mhm.
You can talk about it as part of your goal and so on and so forth.
So 7 to what? 7 to 8:30, 7 to 9. It should have an end.
I kind of like the way we did it on Monday. You know, maybe 12 o'clock, midnight.
We can go 1, 2.
Okay.
I would say 7 to 9-ish, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
7 to 9, I think, is good. 2
Yeah.
hours is a good stretch.
Because, you know, if nobody says anything to say, we can always end it early.
There you go.
Folks generally have a lot to say about the finance side, you know.
I was being facetious, but yeah.
Yeah, how did I not catch that? Now since it's coming up relatively soon, you'll want to think about your marketing for it, because we'll want to do a social media post. So, you know, I don't know if you want to. Does somebody want to just volunteer from the board to just throw me some buzzwords in a, you know, in an email, and then I can work on something and throw it over to Perry to turn into a
We have our PR committee.
PR committee, get on it.
aha.
Go Gary, go Cheryl.
Yeah. So think soundbite, think, you know, succinct, you know, kind of wording for some form of a social media, you know, kind of banner or posting, and then we'll have Perry turn it into something that we can put up on social media.
Sounds good.
Sweet.
Okay.
Anything else? All right. Our next meeting is right here on the internet on December 7th. Have a good Thanksgiving, everybody. We'll see you then. Have a good night.